The Italian Wine Podcast is the community-driven platform for Italian wine geeks around the world. Support the show by donating at ItalianWinepodcast.com. Donate €5 or more and we'll send you a copy of our latest book, My Italian Grape Geek Journal, absolutely free. To get your free copy of My Italian Grape Geek Journal, click Support Us at ItalianWinepodcast.com or wherever you get your pods. Grazie mille.
Welcome to Masterclass US Market with me, Juliana Colangelo. This show has been designed to demystify the US market for Italian wineries through interviews with experts in sales and distribution, social media, communications, and so much more. We will quiz each of our esteemed guests at the end of each episode to solidify the lessons that we've learned. So sharpen your pencils, get out your notebooks, and join us each week to learn more about the US market. Hello, welcome to Masterclass US Wine Market. Today, I am thrilled to welcome Julie Farricker to the Italian Wine Podcast. Julie is a Vinitaly Italian Wine Ambassador and a co-owner of the Italian Cellar, a wine shop that exclusively sells Italian wines. She's also traveled to all 20 regions of Italy, and her next goal is to try every DOCG, DOC, and IGT wine. Very ambitious. When she's not keeping track of that list or educating her customers about Italian wine and gastronomy, she's also a secondary English and social studies teacher specializing in European history. Welcome to the show, Julie. It's so great to have you here.
Thank you so much. Welcome. Thank you.
And appreciate you recording from your hotel room in Modena on your trip in Italy. So we appreciate you taking the time, your precious time over there trying all the DOCGs. How many have you made it to on this trip?
So it's funny. Right now, I'm in the area that specializes in Lambrusco Grapparossa, and that's a really particular type of Lambrusco. So at lunch, I made sure to try like the Apura Pura, which is 100% Lambrusco Grapparossa. And then I also had, multiple courses, of course, for lunch.
Of course.
But then I also had tried where they do the Lambrusco Grapparossa and then also with a blend with Salamino, because Salamino is also from this area as well. So this trip, I also, I was in Firenze before and then also Roma. And every time I travel, I try to stick to regional wines, of course. That's the way to do it.
Mm-hmm.
But now I'm in Lambrusco country.
Oh, exciting. I'll be in Lambrusco country next week, so I'll look out for your suggestions. So Julie, today we're going to talk about, how we can inject this Italian wine bug that you so clearly have into more U.S. consumers to sell more Italian wine in the U.S. Because that's what we like to talk about in this show. But before we dive into that, tell us a little bit more about your background and how you got so deeply entrenched into Italian wine and education.
Okay, so as noted, I am a secondary English and social studies teacher. So I'm about to finish my 20th year teaching high school. And it's been quite a journey because as a teacher, we usually have summers off. I've been traveling to Italy since I started teaching. The reason why Italy specifically is because of my mother and grandmother from the island of Ischia. And then my grandfather had come from the island of Stromboli. So 2 volcanic islands.
I love Ischia. I was there a couple of summers ago.
Yes.
Incredible hot springs.
Beautiful places. So I grew up with Italian culture, very entrenched. My father, his family had come from Ireland, but it was something with my mother and always emphasizing Italy and the culture. So when I had started teaching, with my summers off, I had started visiting Italy and, I was hooked. Maybe it's just because of my roots, but then it was this quest to kind of conquer every single region, because when you talk to most people, they haven't been to all 20 or 21, depending on which source you're reading because of the administrative zones. And they haven't been to all 21. And I just wanted to do that. So I had reached the last region in 2019. And it was actually Friuli Venezia Giulia, because I had visited Trieste.
Okay.
Yes. And so, of course, while, I've been traveling, I would then be wanting to, immerse myself in all the different foods. And then with the foods comes the wines. Because, of course, let's say when I was in Rome, I wasn't going to be ordering, a Brunello or a Barbaresco.
Right.
I'm going to be ordering a Cesanese, something regional. So after I'd reached all 20 regions, a friend of mine from college, he had said, hey, what if we start doing something with Italy, with traveling and Italian wine? So this idea was born during COVID, which of course we knew what COVID was. It was a slowdown for everything.
It also allowed some time for these projects, I find. I find a lot of people like, I started this thing during COVID because
Right.
I think it was like finally you had time at home to like really think about a project and put something together. So I feel like that was one of the silver linings that came out of all that time we all had at home.
Yes.
So you and your friend decided to work on this project.
Yes. And then because of that time at home, because I was always used to being gone during the summer, I saw something for, Vinitaly International Academy and of course, the Italian Wine Ambassador. And I'd always read about it and I'd heard about it. And I said, you know what, this is the time because I already knew Italian geography. I have a background with the language. So it's like, okay. And I was familiar with the grapes, but I really wanted to, kind of master that. So I took the test. I believe it was July of 21 in New York. And I was very fortunate to have passed.
Okay.
And we had already opened the Italian Cellar. So that was really like the benchmark of it. It's just like, the people you're dealing with the Italian Cellar, like we've traveled to Italy often. We know a lot about Italy. It's like bringing the Italian experience to your door. And that's really what the Italian Cellar is because we only sell Italian wines.
Right.
We try to reach all regions. It's just, of course, as you know, with distributors and importers, sometimes our wine portfolio has to change based on availability, again, because of COVID and shipping issues.
Mm-hmm.
So that's really how I'd gotten involved. So my main day job is teaching Florida because I actually live in Florida. Florida was really a spearhead with virtual education. So I've been doing the virtual school. I'm more hybrid.
Got it.
So that's why I'm able to have some more flexibility. But the Italian Cellar itself, the actual business is in Virginia, but then I travel to Virginia and then I'm responsible for doing many of the things online.
Okay, got it. So tell us a little bit more about the Italian Cellar, just the format. I know obviously we know it's focused on Italian wine, but just what makes you stand out from maybe other wine shops with that regional focus?
So because we are exclusively into Italian wines, we try to do the entire Italian experience. So besides just selling wine, we call it a wine passport. And so every single month for our customers who are subscribers, they are sent boxes from different regions. So for example, this month is Umbria.
Very cool.
And so we send based upon preferences. So it could be a mix of red and white, or it could be all white or all red. That's, very customer focused. And with the wines, we make a little booklet. So I had written a booklet, basically like a passport to Italian wines. It explains everything from the wine label to also how to know each region to recipes and tasting notes. And so I'm responsible for the tasting notes as well. And so we have a large database of all the wines that we've been dealing with over the years. And so when we send that, it's basically as if the person is going on a trip to Italy without leaving home, because there is an interest I've noticed, because as you can see on Instagram or anything else that has reels involved, that Italy's hot when it comes to tourism.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, everybody wants to go, the amount of things that I see based in Italy. And so people are starting to get more interested. It's just Italian wine itself, and we can talk about that too later, that, it was very considered like sconosciuti. It wasn't like the wines weren't well known, and it's, because obviously people knew French wines,
Mm-hmm.
but Italian wines, if it's not the three Bs, Brunello, Barbaresco, and Barolo, it's the others tried to have, besides Chianti, it was really hard for them to break into the market because people just didn't know what they were.
Italian Wine Podcast, part of the Mama Jumbo Shrimp family.
Right. There's a lot of education needed.
Yes. And so what I've done is quite a few different seminars about Italian wines. And I've done some of those in person because the Italian Cellar itself has a location that's called like a tasting house.
Okay, it does have a physical
Mm-hmm.
Brick and mortar. Mm-hmm.
And then at the tasting house, we've had Italian wine nights, or people would do private tastings or private parties. And then with that, there's always an educational piece. So let's try the different wines. So really it's about focusing on Italy and not just the wine itself, but hey, let's talk about the cultural aspects of Italy. Let's talk about geographical influences. Basically everything about Italy that you'd want to know, as well as wine.
Very cool. Amazing. So we're going to focus on this episode a little bit deeper. How do we engage U.S. consumers in the category of Italian wine, and learning some of the tricks and tips that you've developed over the last 4 or so years since you've opened the Italian Wine Cellar to really imbue that passion for Italian wine. So our 3 key takeaways for today's masterclass and what we're excited to talk about are: number 1, what is exciting U.S. consumers right now about Italian wine? April 2024. We're sitting in this time where people are drinking less wine, but what are they drinking, especially in Italy? Number 2, what are some tips for educating U.S. consumers? You're an educator by trade, so really excited to learn from you. How do we educate U.S. consumers about a complicated topic like Italian wine? And then finally, number 3, what do we think about the future for Italian wine education for consumers specifically? So just to get started, let's talk a little bit about what's trending right now in Italian wine for your customers in the Italian Wine Cellar. Where are you seeing some really keen interest or excitement in the Italian wine category?
So I find it very interesting that as more people are trying to book trips to Italy, they want to know more of what to expect when they get there. Whereas maybe in the past, someone would, book the Italian tour and go to Venezia, Roma, Firenze, whatever. But now I've noticed that consumers are really trying to find more of like the back road part of Italy.
Off the beaten path.
Right, off the beaten path. And then, of course, with that, it's what do they need to expect? So, for example, where I am right now, it is outside Modena, which Modena usually isn't very much a hot spot for American tourists. But it's really funny because when I checked in today, because I just came from Firenze this morning, I had noticed about 3 other American couples here, and I never see Americans here. I've only seen Italians and maybe other European tourists in the past. And so this further, it made me think okay, and I come to this location at least twice a year. I'm like, this is really interesting, because anyone I've talked to lately within the past few months, it's, hey, I'm going on a trip to Italy. Can you talk to me about Italian wines and maybe send me some Italian wines that I might be trying while I'm there, because I'd really like to know the menu. So that's where I come in, because it's perfect, because then it's like, okay, based on your itinerary, for example, there's someone going to Italy next week, and besides the major cities, also going to Lake Maggiore, and will be coming to this area that I'm in right now. So it was perfect to talk about Lambrusco, which we do offer Lambrusco. It's not a Lambrusco Grasparosa that's made here, but it's another Lambrusco. And then, of course, for Lake Maggiore, talking because it's right near the hot area of Piemonte with Barolo and Barbaresco, I was able to, to introduce that. So it's more like, okay, well, if you have this interest in Italy, let's further talk about why you can learn even more, not just about the food, not just about the geography, but what you're even going to encounter. So I've noticed that, because maybe in the past, even before I was in wine specifically, people would just think about, Rome and Venice and Florence as such. But now it's more like, what am I going to get into? And let me know more cultural bits, which I actually find very encouraging.
Right. So you're seeing people wanting to get information before their trip, doing a lot more research, it sounds like, before they visit, and also visiting some of the more off the beaten path places, even like where you are right now, in Modena, where normally you may not have seen Americans traveling. So what do you think, there's also the challenge, and you touched on this earlier, of the wines being available from those more far-flung regions. So thinking about those 2 things, like people traveling to areas that are a little more off the beaten path, but also availability of the wines in the U.S. market, what do you think is a region right now that maybe has a lot of growth potential in the U.S. market that is a little under the radar?
Well, I find if you'd asked me this maybe a year ago, I would have said still Sicilia, so Sicily.
Yeah.
But I think when the show had come out, what was it called? Because I watched it. Was it White Lotus? Yes. White Lotus made Sicily just really come back on the map. And I had noticed that I would make references to the White Lotus because everyone had seen the show, and they would ask about, well, what were the wines that they were trying during one of their little, they did a Giro where they did a wine tasting. And so I said, well, because they were in the Etna region, and I'm quite the fan of Etna Rosso. So we talked about Etna Rosso, Etna Bianco. But then I said, okay, well, besides those, if you were going to travel to the western part of the island, then we're going to be introduced to Frappato. I mean, because you can find Frappato in the southern part too, but really, like, we have a producer that makes it in the western part of the island. So Frappato, and then even Zebibo. So those are two usually very, like, lesser known wines, but I've been able to sell quite a few Zebibo because we sell a drier version. It's not like the sweet version, because it's like, look, Zebibo is perfect for summer. Put it in the fridge. And then if you're making seafood, it goes well. If you're making a fresh salad, it goes well. And so surprisingly, we've done really well with Zebibo and then Frappato, because Frappato is a perfect one that you can put in the fridge. So Sicilia really is taking off, but I even think that some of the Roman wines are really getting more exposure, because because we also sell, so Cesanese by Casale del Gio, which is great. And then even Bellone as a white wine.
Right.
So, people sometimes will think of Frascati, of course, but I've been really able to focus on Bellone because it's not well known. And when I tell people, like, if you're able to go to Rome, and you're going to find this on a wine list at some of these, at the different Roman restaurants, but this is something special because this is from 30 minutes outside of city center. So I think those Roman wines are really starting to come back. But I also credit producers like Casale del Gio for really, fine tuning those wines to give them a place on the map again.
Right. You need those champions of the region, right, that are going to be in the market too, right, and investing in the U.S. to get the wines, distributed and get them onto more lists so that they gain more recognition and awareness as well.
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
So, thinking a little bit more now, so you mentioned Sicilia, but also the wines outside of Rome and Lazio. How do we educate consumers about these grapes? I know you talked about explaining to them the regionality and where they're grown and how they relate to perhaps some cities they might know or some regions in the country they might have just visited to. But what do you think are some of the most effective ways to educate them on what the wines taste like? I find often with consumers and my friends, like, the first question they ask is like, well, what does it taste like? Like, am I going to like it? People are always, before they invest in that bottle of wine, they want to have some sense of whether they're going to enjoy it. So how do you think we educate consumers about these lesser known Italian varietals?
So I tend to start with, if we're talking, let's say, Italian reds, I always start with a Montepulciano di Abruzzo. I call it the gateway wine. And the reason why is because, so many people are familiar with Chianti Classico, that some people have some type of, like, an image of what that is. They think of the red checkered tablecloths. They think of the different types of restaurants. So that's why I say we're not going to start there. Let's start with Montepulciano di Abruzzo. And I will have a glass of that ready for them. And I'll say, okay, and we'll cover the basics of tasting. And I call that a gateway because usually people will like it. Like, they'll say, oh, well, this is really nice. And if they say they don't, I'll say, well, what is it? Because, the different elements of tasting. Is it that you would like a wine that's not as tannic? Is that what's bothering you? Because we'll talk about we'll take a sip and it's like, okay, let's talk about what tannins are. Let's talk about acidity. And then if that's pleasant for you. So it's kind of like a scale. All right. So based on the acidity and the tannins in this wine, would you like something that's maybe not as fuller bodied, or would you want something that's even fuller than this? And I can gauge from that conversation. So I really think it's important to start with something, because I have really also, I should have mentioned this earlier, had sold quite a few bottles of Schiava. And the reason why is because something, again, going back to Montepulciano di Abruzzo. Well, maybe because, even Virginia and Florida, because Florida is a big market for us because of living there. Florida is very hot in the summer. I also sometimes call Italy Florida, without air conditioning in the summer. That's like the best.
Right.
And because of that, people are not usually looking for very tannic, very heavy wines, because it's just not feasible. So I think Schiava is a really good way to start, even for people who aren't familiar with red wines, or maybe they say, well, I don't like red wines. It's like, well, really? Because let's try this, because a Schiava is so light bodied, because it has some of those candy undertones, red candy. So it's really, starting somewhere going over the elements of tasting, which sometimes people are very, sometimes they're uncomfortable. Like, well, what if I'm wrong? I'm like, well, it's your preference. Like,
Yeah.
I'm just asking you, because after going over tannins and acidity, it might not be the same for every person, but I think we can have a general consensus. And then if you like it, you like it. And if you don't, you don't. So if
Right.
you
You're giving them
do,
some benchmarks too of like how to think about the grapes that they're trying as well. It sounds
right.
like. Yeah.
Because then I'll take it from there with the berries. Like, for example, if we want to go fuller bodied and then we're thinking of notes of berries, we're going to go into the darker berries. Let's talk about blackberries, frutti di bosco. But if we're going to go to the other side, then we're thinking of strawberries, we're thinking of raspberries. So maybe it's the teacher in me, but it's like, let me see where you are, which is, I guess, what I have to do in the classroom. Let me see where you are
Right.
and then gauge
Right.
it. And then based on your preferences, okay, well, maybe you'd like something on this end versus this end. So that's why I say Montepulciano di Abruzzo is a perfect place to start, because that's very readily available. Like, that's one that
So
can always
teaching
be
them,
found.
like teaching them a benchmark, like a Montepulciano, and then when you're introducing them to a new varietal, using that as the benchmark to say this wine is less tannic, less full body than the Montepulciano. Say if we're describing a Schiava or something lighter, or describing a bigger wine, but using that as like that baseline. It sounds like
Yeah.
is what you're saying.
And that has
Yeah.
worked really well, because especially with many customers I've met, it is like teaching, because
Mm-hmm.
they might just know Chianti. And then, of course,
Right.
it's like, well, okay, well, let's talk about Chianti versus Chianti Classico. And then, so
Mm-hmm.
it's really, really just gauging where people are, and never overwhelming,
Yeah.
because Italian wine, as you know, can be so overwhelming.
Totally.
So that's why I like to try to stick it at the beginning to 3,
Mm-hmm.
and then it's the range. And then it's like, okay, well, then if you're really interested in that, like, let's say they like Schiava, I'd say, okay, well, how about let's try a Frappato, because that could be in between a Schiava and a
Right,
Montepulciano di
exactly.
Abruzzo.
Giving them something else. Okay, that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
How about benchmarking against like Pinot Noir or Chardonnay? Like, how do you feel about that?
Yes, because some of the customers will come in and that's what they'll know.
Right.
Because of course, Chardonnay, especially California Chardonnay. And then when we talk about Chardonnay, I'll say, well, Italy has Chardonnay as well. And sometimes we have producers that, I've sold them in the past, where different producers, especially in Tuscany, or even one in Piemonte, was selling like, a dry version, a still dry version of Chardonnay. But then that makes a really good conversation talking about, and I think you would know as a wine person, when people talk about champagne,
Of
and they're like,
course.
excuse me, is it from the Champagne region of France? Or is that Prosecco?
Yeah.
But I really enjoy promoting Franciacorta, because it's, to me, Italy's champagne, or actually, I
Right.
would say it's better than that. Of course, I'm going to say that, but
Of course.
that's the thing too. It's like, okay, do you like champagne? Well, really, let's try a Franciacorta, because we're dealing with the same grapes, just, we're in a different location, change your soil, change your grape.
Right.
So it's really interesting, because if they come with that background, and then Pinot Noir, Italy makes quite a few with the Pinot Nero. That's another good place to start. It's all about, let me have a conversation with you, see where you are, and then we'll go from there.
Right. Get a baseline
Yeah.
and really meet there in order to make them feel comfortable, maybe trying something new or exploring a new region or a new grape or a new wine.
Yes, because I've had quite a few customers who told me, I don't like red wine. I don't like red wine. I said, well,
Interesting.
have you tried Schiava? And then all of a sudden they're buying bottles of Schiava.
Very interesting. I love Schiava.
I do too. I love
I
it.
like how you use that as an entry point or like an introductory wine to your customers.
Right, and then it's so unique, because it's like, well, where is this? And then I always, as a teacher, I have maps everywhere. I'm always, I have the map with me, and it's like, well, really, we're focusing on this region in northeastern Italy. And then it starts a conversation. And then if we're talking about, let's say, Sangiovese, well, look, Sangiovese is not just Tuscany. It's really all over Italy. So, like I said, that's why it's important for people selling Italian wine. It's get to know the customer a little bit, and then also really sell Italy itself, because selling Italy is what also sells the wine.
Right. Absolutely. Because people, like you said earlier, are in love with Italian culture. So especially Americans, are really using that as a selling point. Absolutely. As we're winding down, Julie, you're so in touch with the customer, but also, you travel to Italy quite a bit. You're so knowledgeable about Italian wine. So I'd love your predictions. Like, what do you think in the future? Let's look even like 5-10 years from now. Obviously, we look at like Nielsen numbers, and Pinot Grigio is still eating up like, over 40% or something along those lines of the Italian table wine market. Montepulciano is still big. Prosecco, of course. But what categories do you think might really take off and become more mainstream in Italian wine for the U.S. consumer?
I really think going back to certain regions because right now I believe Italy's number one for European travel. And I'm pretty sure it surpassed Spain and France, according to like some of the recent, forgive me if I'm wrong, but I'm pretty sure as things I've been reading. And I think as people are still interested in going to Italy, it's let me find what else is out there. And because we do have consumers who are willing to spend money as well, I think that's when, we can really focus on like really selling Franciacorta. You love champagne, like I had mentioned earlier. Let's try some Franciacorta. But I really think focusing on certain regions like Sicily still, like there's still so much more to do with Sicilia, but summer's coming and everyone's probably going to Taormina. They're probably going to want to visit Etna and the Etna Rosso and Bianco and try those wines. I really think focusing on Puglia, to me, because when I talk to people about, okay, so where are you traveling? Puglia seems to be a really popular destination. So, okay, well, what is Puglia really known for as well? It's also known for making like most of the Rosato wines in the Italian market. So, it doesn't have to be rosé every day. It could be Rosato every day. Let's just expose you to it. So I really think it's all about exposure. And the reason with, let's say, Pinot Grigio is even I know like different wine study programs, when they focused on Italian wines, like not, of course, Vinitaly International Academy, because the whole point of that is focusing on Italy. Many of them bypassed Italy.
I remember that too, like WSET. It was like, and it's 3 pages and a 200-page book. It was so French dominant.
Yeah, and I didn't understand that because it's like, how can you do that with 600 native grapes? So we have so many wine professionals running around, and I'm not, but of course promoting the French wines, but then it's, well, here I can offer you Chianti or Chianti Classico. I can offer you Barolo if you're willing to open your wallet. And then here's some Pinot Grigio. So I think as something like Vinitaly International Academy, as that gains momentum because it is a popular program, that will then feed more Italian wine knowledge. And then, of course, with that comes consumption. But I really think focusing on that Italian travel, and I'll even have a conversation. Sometimes I'll start with people, especially people will come to me with Italian backgrounds, their grandparents, great-grandparents. And I'll say, okay, so where was your grandfather from? And I'll start the conversation there because I'm like, really? Well, if they were from, let's say, Puglia, okay, have you heard about Nero di Troia? Have you heard about this wine? Have you heard about that? Like, Bombino Nero. Like, let's introduce you to these. So I think it's focusing on certain regions that are very popular. That's really
so
what's going to drive the
focusing on those regions, like you said, continued focus on Sicily, styles like Franciacorta. And then, we know there's a lot of Italian Americans with Southern roots in the U.S. So like you said, Puglia, Abruzzo, Campania, those regions are where so many of our Italian American heritage is coming from. So it makes sense to also really connect it to people's identities too. Awesome.
Yeah. And it's a really good conversation to have, especially with the ones with the roots in the South, because that's where my roots are. And I am very proud to say that and very proud to promote it. Of course, I love all the regions, but will someone say I'm somewhat, favoring to Campania and Sicilia? Probably. But there's a reason for that. And that's where my passion is. So.
Well, Julie, thanks so much for joining today. I mean, this has been great. I've learned a lot, and I think our listeners will too. But, as we wind down, we'll do our rapid fire quiz we do at the end of every episode. If you can try to answer these in 1 or 2 sentences, please. Question number 1, what is your number 1 tip for mastering the U.S. wine market?
It's education, education, education. Not just as a teacher that I say that, but the more that we know about the market, what the wines that we sell on our consumers, the easier it is to reach our market.
Yep, absolutely. Question number 2, what is something you might have told your younger professional self about selling wine in the U.S.?
I would say, really, because I happen to come into this, in a very odd way, I'd say, really be proud of your roots and really make your grandparents and your parents proud, because you're really showing where they came from. Now that's really what you're doing, and really promoting Italy and everything of it.
And finally, number 3, we all travel a lot. I know you travel back and forth to Italy quite a bit. What is one of your favorite travel hacks in doing travel for work or for pleasure?
Ooh, okay. As I mentioned, many people will come to Italy during the summer, and it is rather warm. So I always carry my own set of fans. I have a fan that I carry in a tote bag, and I have personal fans that I even wear around my neck because those summer temperatures are very hot. And I also always tell people, this is what I do. I bring an empty suitcase, and I am buying everything made in Italy that I can to come back home with. Because there are so many good made in Italy products, and you name it, if you come into my house, from the toothpaste to even cups, made in Italy. And so really good prices. And of course, I'm supporting the local economy.
Yeah,
and you should
I love that. Even their beauty products, I have found, I try to stock up when I'm there too. So great tip.
Oh boy. I just bought some lip glosses today while I was waiting for my train, and I went into the Farmacia in Firenze in the train station. I was like, well, I need some new lip glosses, and they're made in Italy. Okay. So I just think everyone needs to do that.
Well, Julie, thank you again for joining us today in the Italian Wine Podcast. How can our listeners follow along with everything you're doing in the world of Italian wine?
So please follow us at the Italian Wine Cellar LLC. That's our handle for Instagram. I'm also on Instagram as Julia Farr, but Julia the Italian way. So GIULIAFARR. And then, of course, email. If you come to our website at the www.theitaliancellar.com, we have a contact part here. Email me any question you have about Italy, and I will make sure to tell you everything you need to know and then some. Thank you.
Amazing. Thanks again, Julie.
Thank you. Grazie mille.
Thank you for joining me today. Stay tuned each week for new episodes of Masterclass US Wine Market with me, Juliana Colangelo. And remember, if you enjoyed today's show, hit the like and follow buttons wherever you get your podcasts.